everyone. Welcome to the opening of our 2022 SNOMED CT Research Webinar Series. I'm Susie Roy, the Customer Relations Manager for the Americas and Research Engagement Lead at SNOMED International, and as always, the host of the SNOMED CT Research Webinars. Just a couple of really quick housekeeping items as always. You'll notice that everyone is currently muted. If you have any questions, go ahead and post your questions in the Q&A box, and we will have a Q&A portion at the end as we always do. But also just to give you guys a little heads up, we are going to have a little bit more discussion going on in this webinar. So please go ahead and follow along, and we hope to have a lively and engaging discussion today. And the last little bit is that today's webinar is being recorded, and if you wanted to access the recording or slides at the end, we'll make those available later this week. For those who are new today, of course, welcome. Just to let you know that in addition to this research webinar series, we also have a clinical webinar and an implementation webinar. You can find out when the upcoming webinars are by going to snomed.org/web-series. From there, you can see all of our SNOMED CT web series, both the past and the future webinars. And we hope to see you at one of those webinars. Just to give you a little bit of a heads up that next month, we will be hosting Dr. Paulette Denise Chandler from Harvard Medical School and Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. Dr. Chandler's group utilized SNOMED CT for cohort building and analytics in their widely acknowledged publication, Hypertension Prevalence in the All of Us research program among traditionally underrepresented groups in medical research. I am wicked excited for this presentation, so I really hope that you can join us on Tuesday, February 15th at 19 UTC. And if you'd like to be notified of that or any other upcoming research, SNOMED CT research related news, you can email me, sro@snomed.org, and I will put you on the SNOMED CT research reference group, which means you will just get push notifications of any of these upcoming research related news. Oh, here's a little teaser that I wanted to let you guys know. We are having a call for abstracts. That's actually not going to open up until February 15th, but right now we are planning for our end of the year SNOMED CT Expo to happen in person in Lisbon, Portugal. So go ahead and start thinking about your abstract topics, and when that opens on February 15th, you'll be ready to submit. So looking forward to seeing you all there. And as I mentioned, we have the webinars series, clinical implementation and research webinar. But in addition to that, we have a lot of other SNOMED CT videos. So you can go to our YouTube channel, SNOMED International YouTube channel, and you can watch our previous expo videos, demos, and any of our SNOMED CT value series. So go ahead and check that out, and I recommend that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. All right, and so last but not least, want to kick off our main event today. I am so pleased to present Dr. Anna Rossander. She is a urologist turned health informatician with a special focus on SNOMED CT. Dr. Rossander works at the Unit for Informatics and Standardization in Region Västra Götaland. Sorry if I killed any of that. Dr. Rossander is currently pursuing a PhD in informatics at Gothenburg University. And today she'll be presenting SNOMED CT Terminology Binding, a state-of-the-art review with recommendations for practice and research. And with that, I will stop sharing. And
thank you.
Yeah.
So here we go. Good. So thank you so much for inviting me. We're the four of us who've written the paper together, and I think Lars and Daniel are in the audience, so they're here as well. So that's very nice. So you just presented me. I'm Anna. Please just say Anna. I was about to say just ask questions as we go. I think the instructions was to take them sort of towards the end, but please just raise your hand or post them in the chat, and we'll try to sort it out as we go. I've made an agenda sort of like this. I'll walk you through the paper. I'll post the paper in the chat, a link to the paper. I think we got it now. For those of you who want to look at the paper. And I'll walk you through how the paper and how we performed the study and the results. And then I'm going to expose you to a poll. So you're going to have to answer what parts of the discussion that you're most interested in, and we'll take them in that order. So be prepared. Also, as I said, please just ask questions, raise your hand or type it in the chat. I don't think I can see the hands. I think Susie will sort that out.
I can see the hands. So yeah, go ahead and raise your hands and I will get you to unmute your
and I can do that. But I'll also do a poll for you straight away. I just want to know like sort of who's listening. So we're gonna, I think Susie's gonna set that off. There are 2 questions. They're very easy. Here you go.
Just launched it.
Yeah, I won't read it. You can read it. And I can't vote. Hosts and panelists cannot vote. Now I know Sweden is a part of Europe. It's just I was extra curious, so that's why I put that as a separate option. Don't get upset.
64% reporting. Hey, okay, we're in the 70s.
Maybe some people won't vote or they're from the mobile or something, so we'll give it a sec. There's some more votes coming in, otherwise maybe we're happy.
We're at 91%. We're pretty good. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So if I end the poll, we'll still be able to see the data, right? This is our first time doing the poll, so. So if I close it by ending it, we'll be able to see, right?
I don't know. I can only see the questions still.
Here, I'll do a quick screenshot just in case.
Smart.
Okay, I'm gonna end the poll. Okay, we do see it. All right. All right, let me see. Can I share the results?
Oh, there it is. Good.
Okay.
Okay. Now I have to look at the results. Okay, so most of you guys are working like on the healthcare side, or half. Okay, half. And then development. Other, that's obviously very interesting. And most are from Europe. Maybe that has to do with the time zone.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. But there are some people from the other side of the world. That's really good of you to be here at this time. Okay. Thank you. I can press close here, right? Yeah. Okay. So the paper. The aim of the work that we did was, it was a literature review. We wanted to find out what was published on this area, what was published about terminology binding, about difficulties and possible solutions to them, but also where was there a gap? What are there things that we should research more? And we've tried to keep the audience to be both practitioners and researchers. So that's been the intent of the paper. So first I'd like to start with talking about what is terminology binding, because that's what the entire paper is about. And I think we should be in agreement. So this is the definition by Benson and Grieve about terminology binding, establishing links between elements of a terminology and an information model. So this is a very basic example about allergies, and you can be allergic to, in this case, 4 different things. This could be any system. You recognize this type of setup. And a terminology binding would be to develop SNOMED CT terms for this type of, for this list. And this type is called the value set binding. And It's very similar to what people used to call subset development. And in this paper, we're defining, and I think that's a decent way of defining it, to just say that a value set is intended for a specific place in a specific information model, whereas a subset can be used anywhere. And obviously the same list can be a value set and a subset, and it can be a value set in very many different places in different information models. So these two words are in a sense very similar, and developing them, the process of developing them, is also very similar. And it's also very similar to mapping. Basically, the only difference between mapping and the subset development is that you keep the initial list because you want to use it in another system, or you want to use it for legacy data, for instance. But the choice of concepts is the same. So that's very similar. There is also a type of terminology binding that we'll talk about later, which is called meaning binding. And that's when you work on sort of the left-hand side of the information model and you bind a concept. Let's see if I can go use a pointer. Here you go, on this side. Can you see this red thing? Yeah. Where you bind a concept to the question or the attribute that you're using. And that can be helpful at some times. We'll get back to that later. So this is how we define terminology binding in the paper. Okay, so we did a search, a literature search in 3 databases shown on the box on the left. And we use these 3 different search strings. So there's SNOMED, and then there's one of the words in the map, terminology binding, information model, implement, or subset. And then we excluded hits with ICD because there are so many hits on mapping to ICD. So we excluded them. We were not interested in that type of, that's not what we use in documentation settings anyway. And we found approximately 1,200 papers. Many were duplicates, they were removed. And then we entered all of these papers in a program called Ryan. It's a web program. And we blindly read the abstracts and looked for papers containing mapping from, or process of mapping from to SNOMED in some form. A subset development, something, and describing this process. And in the end, we had 83 papers that we agreed on were interesting, and we added them to an annotating tool called NVivo. And when we did that, we realized that some of them didn't have full text. Some of them, when we finally got the full text, they weren't on topic, even though we thought so, or the actual process that we were interested in was not sufficiently described, so they were excluded. And finally, we had 55 papers. They were distributed like this. They were published from 2004 to 2020. Most of them are from information system outlets. Only two were from medical journals. Half of the, sorry, I misspelled. Half of the first authors were women, and the projects were very varying in size. The smallest was a 10 concept demo of post coordination, and the biggest was a semi-automatic free text to SNOMED CD with 37,000 terms. Very different products, and they were distributed like this geographically. Okay, so these 55 papers, we read them, and we read first 20 of them, and we developed topics like this in the picture, like things that the papers were about. There's a reference here for a paper where they describe this type of model, this method. And I'll walk you through these topics, as these are like the basis for the discussion. But the first one was obviously the topics in themselves that we developed, like the ones that you see here in the picture. So there's a little delay from when I press the button until you guys see the screen. It's a bit annoying. Okay, so the input material. What type of material did these projects use? Most of them, the majority, they started with documentation, the 3 bars on the left. 9 papers started from the other side, like guidelines or literature. And they were often, the intention with those projects were often to support data gathering. They would, for instance, say, we have this guideline, we want to follow up if it's working or if people are following it. Or they wanted to develop some sort of clinical decision support tool or something. And that's why they wanted to use SNOMED CD for that information. But most of them started with documentation, and most of these were existing terminologies. That's the 33 bar. So they would have a system already or a paper format, and they would try to map it or turn it into SNOMED CD instead. That was the most common. Another topic that we looked at was what type of competence did the people who worked in the project have. In 22 of the papers, that was not stated. So that's almost like 40% of the papers. They didn't say anything about the competence. Some of these papers, they were about developing tooling. So that's why I think they didn't say that. Some of them just didn't state it. The ones that did state competence, the most common situation was that they were both some sort of domain knowledge, domain experts, and informaticians or terminologists, and a mixture of those two. And then some of them had only one or the other, as you can see here. Then we looked at what type of tools they were using. And there was no paper that said they used one and only one tool for the entire work. There's no such tool. I'll tell you straight away, there's no magic tool. But they've used different browsers, and the most commonly used browsers were ClinicU and SNOMED International Browser. And then there were a few other browsers, I listed them there. And there were also some terminology binding tools, and some of them are still used. I mean, like Snapper is still a common or a commercial tool. Some of them were actually most of them were prototypes, or they just tried them. The paper was about the tool being tried or developed, and then there was only one paper on it, and it doesn't seem to be around anymore. 5 papers mentioned lack of tools as a specific problem. When it comes to how they sorted the input data and how they published the subsets or the value sets, the most commonly used tool was Microsoft Excel, which is not made for this, but used for this. No paper mentioned using, for instance, a Fire-based server. That was not mentioned. Okay, and then there was a big topic about problems. Many of the papers mentioned what types of problems they've run into, and we sorted them into sort of 4 subtopics, subnodes. One is on input material, one is about SNOMED CT, one is about information models, and one is about tools. So when it comes to input materials, the problems were of the type that there were local terms or abbreviated terms that were hard to understand, or that the terms were very context dependent, and that it was obvious for the people using the terms what it meant, but that when you wanted to map it to SNOMED CT, you needed to know the context. I think the example was some sort of surgery that was always done laparoscopically, so they didn't state that. But if you don't know that, then you can't select the appropriate SNOMED CT concept. The SNOMED CT concept problems, I'll take them on the next slide. They don't fit here. They're not that bad. The problems with information models was mainly that there wasn't one, or there wasn't a stated one. So they couldn't share the burden of the work with others because they would be using different information models, or they couldn't also share the information because they've done it in different ways. So that was the main problem that was stated about information models. And the tools was the lack of them, basically, that I mentioned previously. Some papers also mentioned that if you use different browsers, you would get different results for the same search, which is probably due to them using different versions of SNOMED CT or having different preferences. But that was still a problem for the people in that project. So when it came to SNOMED CT, these were the types of problems that people mentioned, and that were mentioned in the papers, and the most common was the failure to find the concept. It does not mean that 60% of concepts were not found, just that 60% of papers mentioned not finding a concept for maybe 1% or 2% of the terms that they were looking for. So that's not all of them, but this is something that people generally run into. There's also lack of terms. You find the concept, but not the term. Or the term is incorrect, or the concept is incorrect. And then there were many issues about concept model, that it was either underdeveloped, some would say, that the concept they wanted could not be modeled. I think, I can't remember the example now, but I think the reasoning in that paper was that this SNOMED CT was developed and has a very advanced concept model for procedures, but for other types of concepts or notions that will be more difficult. People have problems choosing the correct hierarchy if there are similar terms that belong to concepts in different hierarchies. Domain knowledge or domain experts can choose the wrong one. Subsumption is incorrect, or at least not as they would have hoped to. There's an example, I'll come to it later, making it not always easy to just say this concept and all of its children. That might not be correct. And this also goes for navigational concepts, which are included for that reason. And sometimes that's good, and sometimes they end up in subsets where you shouldn't be able to use them. And then again, the boundary problem, what should go in the information model and what should go in the terminology. Some of the solutions that we saw in the papers and some of the problems also that were described reveal the lack of knowledge about SNOMED CT. So maybe this is a finding as well, that SNOMED CT is very complex, and it has to be able to do what it can do, but it also means it puts high demand on people using it. And that's sometimes a problem as well. So validation was one of the sort of points that were often mentioned in the process. 60% of the papers, they described some type of validation of the work they've done. And many said manual, basically that you had two independent mappers and they would do the work independently and then compare. But there was also tools supported, either automatic controls of some sort, that it was the right hierarchy or stuff like that, or that at least there was a tool that would present like suggestions to the domain expert. And then we looked at the project motivations and output. Initially, this was actually 2 nodes, but we realized that most of the projects that started with an idea of doing something ended up with doing that. So that was sort of the same thing. And there were basically 4 types of papers. The first type was evaluation of applicability. Basically, for this domain, could we use SNOMED CT? We were a bit surprised that there were so many papers of this type, because we thought that was sort of proven already. But there were apparently a few, and they were evenly distributed over time. We thought initially maybe those were older papers, but they were also newer papers. And then there are papers describing implementations, like we did this in our system, and we did it this way, and this was good, and this was bad. And then there are papers who are more geared towards recommendations. They would maybe describe a project, but the major output of the paper would be, in general, use clinical findings when you are looking to describe symptoms or stuff like that. And then there were a few papers who were only geared at developing tools. They wouldn't have an output like in a subset or something, but only the tool. None of the papers that we found and included described any repeated work. So they were like one-offs, all of them. And then the recommendations that were given in the papers, we said that they were basically 3 types or 3 themes, which are the ones I put on the screen. So the first one is to make sure that there is both domain knowledge and informatics competence in the project. Many of the papers mentioned that substantial education was needed for the clinicians. I'm laughing because I'm one of the clinicians, so I can laugh about this. But they also say that a benefit of this is to involve the clinicians and to teach them about SNOMED CT and informatics, is that you can make sure that they can support developing a system that supports how they work, as opposed to having a system make or sort of define how they work. So it's the work rules over system, as opposed to system rules over work practice. The second point, follow process, including validation. Well, that's what I talked about previously. There was about the process, this with the validation was like the one thing that they actually all stressed. Apart from that, there was not any recommendations on how to do the actual binding. There was only one paper included that actually said, like, for this type, choose this, for this type, choose that. But the validation was stressed by many papers. It could be done either as a continuous process, like they would say that it will be iterative and go back and forth, or be discussions, or it could be a separate step towards the end with like a comparison between different modelers, for instance. And then many papers stress the maintenance plan, that since SNOMED CT is an evolving terminology, if you develop SNOMED CT subsets, they're going to have to curate it and maintained, and that's going to be a substantial workload, as one paper put it. So you need to plan for that. It's going to be how that's going to be done. So these are the results. And now we've come to poll number 2, the final poll. Don't worry, I won't give you any more.
All right. I'm on it.
See if I can get it. No, I'll press 1.
I'm going to launch it.
Yeah, So yeah, there you go. I think you can see both the poll and actually the slide. They're the same things. So in the paper, under the discussion section, we've divided it like this. And for each of these topics, we've written a little bit, and then we've written one recommendation for practitioners and one recommendation for researchers. And well, maybe we can go through all of them. We'll see. We'll take them in the order that you vote for them.
We have 6% reporting right now. Oh, that must have lit some fires under people because now all of a sudden it jumped up.
Maybe it took some time and then they were fit.
We're at 68% with lack of terms or concepts, or using pre-coordinated concepts or post-coordinated concepts, or using the info model as being highest ranking right now.
You see the results as we go.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't.
Oh, I can from my end. Sorry. Maybe I'm spoiling it. Sorry. When I said that, I noticed more people voted. So yeah, vote for.
Oh, because oh no, I don't hear about that one. I want to have the other one.
Okay, we have 85% reporting. I'm going to give you guys another 5 more seconds to get your last minute votes in. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, I will end that poll and share those results with you.
Whee! Okay, lack of terms or concepts is absolutely the winner, or absolutely, but it is the winner. Okay. Now you're going to see the other
questions I was going to ask you, so that works perfect for me. I promise I could not vote.
Here we go, lack of terms or concepts. Let's just see if I can. You can close your eyes and I'll tell you. Okay, here we go. So I'll put this on the other screen so I don't lose it. There you go. Well, there will always be a lack of terms or concepts. I think maybe one of the
I need to stop sharing so that you don't get a black screen. One moment.
Oh no, then I'm sharing this probably.
Okay, 1 second. Let me. Okay.
Oh no, I lost the poll. You're gonna have to tell me.
I can tell you as you go.
That's okay. Are you seeing my screen now?
Yes. Before I was seeing a big black box in the middle, and I think that's from where I was sharing the results. But I can share them again after.
Oh no, that's fine. You can just tell me which is the next one.
Okay.
Okay, so this one was the top one anyway, right? Lack of terms or concepts. So the first thing I want to say is that there will always be a lack of terms and concepts because things happen and things develop, and SNOMED CT is not finished in any way. But our recommendation for practitioners regarding this is to engage in relevant clinical reference groups. Personally, I think that's easier said than done because they are on the international level and many of the clinicians are on a national level, at least where I work. And engaging in a group in a different country, or at least in other countries with a different language, and then working to find new concepts and terms, that will take time, and it will take time before they show up in the Swedish extension that they are actually using. So it's easier said than done, but that is still the recommendation to do that and to request a new content as needed, and that this is nothing strange. This is going to happen forever. It will never be perfect. It's also maybe important to try to keep to inform clinicians about what is suitable. Sometimes there were problems described in the papers about missing concepts that would not go into SNOMED CT. That will be better to use another terminology, or that will be better catered for by using a combination of terminology and information model. Specifically, this will be concepts like breast cancer, and then before deep venous thrombosis, I think is one of the examples. And there will, I don't think, ever be a pre-coordinated concept in SNOMED CT having all of that information in it. It's better to store them separately, like the 2 events or the 2 findings with the timestamp. So things like this is more about educating users than actually developing SNOMED CT. I think the recommendation for research here is to try to design a tooling that is easier to use and perhaps easier to use closer to the need or the user who is requesting the new content. And then there is I think that is on the other one, that is lack of term. I have a slide showing the button, the plus button. We'll see if that shows up. Otherwise, that is I'll come to that later if it doesn't show up by itself. It's about how to easily send requests to the National Release Center for new terms or concepts, or at least new terms.
Anna, we do have a hand raise from Lena England. If you wanted, I can open up the line for Lena to speak.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Lena, hey. Now I heard the name. I saw the picture.
Lena, you are allowed to unmute. You just need to unmute your line and you can.
Oh, sorry, I thought you heard me.
You're good.
No, we didn't. Nu har vi.
Hej Anna, jättebra. I'm sick in my bed, so that's why I sound a little peculiar. But it's very interesting. I voted for this lack of terms or concepts because what I meant with that was that there's a lot of quality problems in the concepts that are in SNOMED now. So if you want to use the terms that you have or the concepts, many of them are not so very good modeled, and they're also very old. Have you looked at that?
I think you mean that the concepts are incorrect.
Now, I shouldn't maybe not say incorrect, but they are modeled in an old way, like before 2016, and some of them are just primitive concepts. And if you really want to use good concepts, it feels wrong to do terminology binding or value sets using concepts that are from 2002 and primitive.
Oh, well, I agree, and the only way to change that is to work with those concepts and either inactivate them and replace them, or add more attributes and make them fully defined. And there's somebody writing in the chat that the best way is to engage with the CRGs, and probably that is so. At least my experience in Sweden is that majority of our content is from the international edition, so we can't just, when it comes to terms, Swedish terms, we can do a lot, but when it comes to primitive content that we want to have fully defined, we have to work with the international edition.
Yeah, that's I'm working in Norway, as you know, Anna, and we do have that problem too, that we want to change a lot, but we have to even if I'm working with the Norwegian NRC, so we do need some more effort in the international
edition.
Yeah. And the people who work there, I know they do the best they can, but I think that's a problem when it comes to terminology binding as well, that you get locked.
It is a problem with this one, but and then it becomes a problem for terminology binding because you don't want to use the concepts.
No, exactly. Okay, thank you.
Just to make sure everyone on the line knows. So Marie Alexandra Limbaugh, as Anna said, mentioned a great way to also provide those updates is through the CRGs. Just so everyone knows, CRG is our clinical reference groups. We have a large number of clinical reference groups for different specific domains, and I can post a link to the CRGs in just a moment.
That's great.
And in addition to that, Dr. Jim Case says, this is an area of older concepts that is being addressed by our SNOMED Quality Improvement Initiative, our QI initiative.
That's also great. And I think with the more frequent releases, I think that it will be a quicker gain to engage in a CRG from engagement to perhaps actually seeing an improved concept in your own edition. And then I think that facilitates, it makes it more motivating for people to engage. So that's also good. So lots of good stuff is happening.
And we do actually have a Q&A, something in the Q&A box from Carl Harsager. Working with Lena, another example of problem is suspected quote, wrong, parent-child relationships may be old contents.
Where did you read that? In the Q&A?
Down in the Q&A box.
Q&A box. I don't think I can see the Q&A box. Okay. Was that a question to me? No, it was a comment.
I think it was just as a statement, as an example of another suspected, another potential problem.
Right.
Yep.
Maybe we should, I'm clicking through my, I think I'll show you the plus button, and that even though that maybe was not number 2 on the polling list, I'll just show you. Why is this going all over the place? Stop doing that. It's just the recommendation before with the incorrect terms because they're related. So the recommendation that we put here is to report them to the NRC, and they will do a content request service if it's about an international term. It's just that it takes a long time, just as we just talked about. And I'll show you the button I talked about. So this is a screenshot from the Swedish browser. I mean, it's the international browser, but it's the Swedish extension. And you can see there's a little plus button there, which I don't think you're used to seeing unless you work in Sweden. And if you press that button, it will open this box where it says in Swedish, suggestions on synonyms for this concept. But the gray box is a free text box, so you can enter anything there. I've tried, I've put in lots of comments in those boxes, and they turn out into Jira tickets for the Swedish NRC. So this is a very efficient way to send in comments and suggestions, and I think it's good because it's efficient, but personally, I also think it's the best thing about it is that we can tell our clinicians that if they're not happy, because they're working with something, and then when they're looking in the SNOMED browser about this area that they're professionals in, they're not happy with the terms, we can just say, yeah, well, that's fine. You just use the plus button and you just send in your comment. And I think it makes them feel like their experience and their knowledge is interesting for us, and that they can actually change and model what they're working with. So I think that's it's a very good function. I think more people should use it. It's in the browser somewhere. You just have to activate. But none of the papers talked about this, so I have no research backing this. It's just my personal opinion. Okay, should we take number 2 on the list?
All right, so number 2 on the list is, let's see, using pre-coordinated concepts or post-coordination, or using
the information model. I know this one, it's a mess. I'm just clicking through to see where it is in the list. I think it's towards the end. Go there. Yeah, this is the one. Okay, so I put in a picture here that's actually from the paper, just explaining these 3 different options first. Maybe this is like opening an open door, but I'll do it anyway. So this is a pre-coordinated concept for like left hand. There is such a concept, and it has an own ID. And this is using SNOMED CT compositional grammar to express the same thing, where you just go hand laterality equals left, and you can do this with SNOMED CT. And these 2 can be sort of stored in the same attribute or box in an information model that both are called body sites or wound location, or I don't know what, whatever you want to describe, which is a place. But this is another thing where you, in the information model, actually separated body site and then laterality. You can still use SNOMED CT concept here. And this is where you can do the meaning binding that I talked about initially, where you could actually bind a concept to body site and one to laterality. And if you do that, then you could be able to exchange information between all of these, because they will be able to understand. I mean, it's not that easy. They have to use some sort of computer system as well, but it will be understandable between the 3. Otherwise, the information model, where there are 2 separate parts of the information model, will be sort of stuck in that demarcation line, and the other 2 could be understandable between each other. So this is a question that many papers ran into. Do we do a pre-coordinate concept? Do we post-coordinate? What do we do? Basically, no paper mentioned post-coordination. I think this is like unknown. So most papers wanted to pre-coordinate if possible. And especially this is where the example is with the breast cancer that was before the distal venous thrombosis example, that's a legacy term that they have in their system, and they want to have the same, or they want to map it to SNOMED CT term, but that's just not possible because it will be a combinatorial explosion if we would do all of those terms. It would have to be different instances of the information system. So this, the recommendation, oh, sorry, I haven't pressed that button. There you go. The recommendation for practitioners when it comes to this is to try to be consistent so that for your entire system, you have the same demarcation. And if possible, try to use the same demarcation as other systems or other like registries or whatever that you're going to share information with. But for researchers, the recommendation is to try to develop tooling to facilitate post coordination so we can use that more and also automatically compare pre and post coordinated content. And the final recommendation would be to try to compare different demarcation lines to see what will be the most efficient. What should we store with SNOMED CT or another terminology, and what should we store with the information model? Go ahead and ask questions.
I did see something in the chat. Let me check what that was from, oh, Mikkel. Hi, Mikkel. I assume that all health informatics standards with larger content like SNOMED CT, HL7 Fire, OpenEHA, and others struggle with the large size of their content in relation to the quality of the content. Oh, I assume the only thing we can do is to keep on with our work and constantly make the content and quality situation a little better since there is no other way to do it. Yeah. Yeah.
This is like tough, but just do it anyway.
Yeah.
I think this is mostly with regard to the previous question.
Yep.
This is a chat problem with like delay.
And then let's see, in the Q&A box, we have something in the third example. Does it mean you may use qualifiers separately in binding?
Here we go. No, I can see the Q&A box. I found it. Okay. I probably could see it all the time. It's just I found it now. The third example is probably this one to the far right. Does it mean you may use qualifiers separately in binding? You mean left is a qualifier value. If you can use it on your own. Is this the question? Well, yes. Yeah, I'd say so. And if you have a system that looks like this, and you have a box for laterality, you would probably have maybe 3 options, left, right, and both. I think that concept is called left and right. And they are qualifier values, and they would be, the 3 of them would be the value set for this attribute. Was that an answer to the question?
Carl says, yes, that is the question. Yes, sure.
Okay. Oh, there is like a thread here. I didn't know this. And
then we have from Anonymous, I do not see a send comment to NRC in my browser. How do I get that control?
You have to mail your NRC and tell them to activate that button. They don't have it. What country or what extension?
Yeah, I was going to say, if anyone has issue with that, go ahead and you can email either me directly, sro@snomed.org, or you can email our general inbox, info@snomed.org, and I can help get you in touch with your NRC, your National Release Center.
Yeah, exactly. It's a decision on National Release Center level, because I mean, obviously I just say they activate the button, but they have to take care of the answers or the questions as well. So they have to be prepared to do that. But I think it's a good button. Okay. Should we take the next one?
Yeah, let me share the results again. All right, so next one is going to be,
is it choice of information model? Oh yeah. No, you're going to be so disappointed because there's not much to say about that. I wish I could say.
Maybe some people will have some comments about it.
Maybe. I keep getting stuck with this pointer. You can probably see me trying to get out of the screen. I don't know. There's probably a trick. But I don't know how to sort out. So here we go. Oh, manage, I won't go there again. So choice of information model, that's the next slide here. There we go. So there's no agreement on what information model to use. That's the bad news. The good news is that SNOMED CT can be used with any information model. And the recommendation, basically we're saying it's beyond scope to choose information model, but what we said previously still goes. Try to use it's the same demarcation throughout the system. So, and depending on what information model you have, that will help you do that demarcation between information model and terminology. And then we're also mentioning these DCMs, which is those, I mean, they're initially from Nictus in Holland, they were called ZIBs, and then it's been developed in ISO standard. It's not finished. I think it's like in draft, the 13972, and now they're called DCMs. Also, I think these clinical initiative, clinical informatic medical initiative, the CMEs, they're similar. And they are information model neutral. So that's an option to try to use them. We're actually looking at this in the paper we're working on now. What's the difference, or is there actually a big difference between information models? Maybe the content and the demarcation is actually pretty similar, but we haven't finished that work yet, so we don't know. So sorry, no answer to what information model would be the best. Yeah, that's what Jim says, that the challenge, it has to cater for all types of information models. Yeah. And that's also what we can see in the papers, that people ask for terminology or for concepts that they need to use because the information model is so poor. They need to have lots of information in the concept, and that's just not doable. Now Michael is.
So I do have a question for you just on general methodology of your research from Mikkel. I don't know if you wanted to answer that now or do another.
Answer that now. We did. Okay. I mean, they're only 55 papers. So that's the first answer, that we might have missed sort of tendencies for things, but we did try to find patterns that were related to when things were published, and we didn't find any. And the problems are mentioned in so few papers. I mean, the same problem, so it will be hard to say. It will be statistically hard to say. We didn't get that hunch, unfortunately. Sorry. Okay. Should we take a final one, or maybe two more?
Yeah, we can do another, and we'll check time.
Understanding the meaning of terms. I'll just do scroll.
Understanding meaning of terms is the next print.
Okay, so I think that one is pretty early. This one.
Yes.
So many papers talked about this problem, that the terms that you get to start with is not so easy to understand, and this is also why the papers who did state competence of people involved, 3 out of 4 of those stated that they included domain knowledge, and we think this is sort of a sign that people understand that to do terminology binding, you need to involve people who know the domain, otherwise it's not going to work. But they also need to have some knowledge about SNOMED CT. For example, hierarchies, and for example, the difference between a fully specified name and a synonym, and when to choose what, and the risk of finding the same term as synonym for 2 concepts. If they don't know that, they might pick the wrong concept. So the recommendation is to involve domain experts and actually invest time in educating them, not just sort of sending them a link to the browser and say, off you go. And the recommendation for research is to try to support or develop supportive tooling that is geared towards domain experts more. I think this is ongoing. I hear these rumors about like modeling with the, what's it called in English, where you have like, you don't need to know the concept model very well. You just like, I can't explain this. I've just heard that there's work going on with this, where you can sort of make it easier for a domain expert to actually hands-on help out with the modeling, and that will probably, this is not about the term issue, this is about involving domain experts, but that would probably be good, I think. So if that was an answer to the question about this.
We do have a question. Sometimes it is very difficult for non-English speakers living in other health systems to get a clue what some concepts might mean, especially in primitive concepts of procedures, objects, functions of persons.
I really agree. I really agree. I think in Sweden we're spoiled because we have a majority of content translated, which is often helpful, sometimes not helpful. But I fully agree, and that is and it especially goes for primitive, because otherwise you can get a clue from attributes and value pairs. But otherwise, if it's a primitive concept, it's only the FSN. And some of the concepts are actually, they are not unambiguous as they should be. And this is just going to happen. I think we're going to have to accept that and be more proactive or more active regarding reporting things like this to have them improved or inactivated.
Good points on both ends. Yes, absolutely. Did you want the last discussion topic that we probably have time? Well, let's see on timing. Okay, so the next one would be tooling. Tooling. Or tools. Sorry, tools.
Oh no, here we go again.
All the way up to the end. Sorry, I'm making you scroll.
All the way up to the end. No, I don't mean that. I mean that I end up with the laser beam thingy and I can't get out of the screen. There you go. Now I understand what happens. I'm in the other screen. That's what happens. And I can see it on both screens. Anyway, tooling. I think it's towards the end here. I just made these 3 boxes because this is at least one way of dividing what type of work you're doing. There's not going to be a one tool for all of these, but there's a gathering data, gathering whatever you want to have as input. There's actual mapping as a storing and sharing. And for gathering, most people use Excel, and it's not great, but maybe it's what we have. For mapping, when we read this and when we wrote this, there was some dedicated tooling, but not much. Since then, Snap to SNOMED is being developed. So that's, I think, a great step forward. And the recommendations that we have for practitioners is actually to use such tooling when there exists one. And the recommendation for research is to design more tools specifically for terminology binding, for the mapping part, because there are not many for those. And there are also not many for storing and sharing. Some information model initiatives are publishing their subsets like FHIR and OpenEHR. But we could see more of that. So that's what we said about tooling.
That's great. And let me just do one final call for any questions or comments. Let me check. We have a couple different areas where people can.
Yeah, I realized.
So I need to check them all. I want to make sure that I don't miss anyone.
I posted early on in the general chat, I posted in the link to the paper. Yes. So anybody who wants to have a look at that can go there. And there's also my email address. Unless you know any one of the other authors, you just mail us.
I will post in the chat box a link again so people don't have to scroll all the way through.
Here you go. Next study. Well, it's the one comparing information models. We'll see. It's going along slowly.
And then we do have one final question in our thing from Christine. How is this related to the time frame of your study? I experience a lot of tooling issues being solved by the common publication of information models and terminology in FHIR.
Maybe Christina knows something I don't know. When it comes to terminology binding, the actual mapping work, is there a FHIR supported tool for that? Like that is, I didn't know.
So we do have also our SNOMED on FHIR group. We did have kind of 2 different kind of subgroups working on terminology binding and also terminology services. We meet now, all of our topics kind of get combined into a meeting fortnight on Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday. Anyone is welcome to join. I will leave a link. When I email all participants, I will also link to that SNOMED on FHIR group. If anyone's having issues with SNOMED, utilizing FHIR for their terminology binding with SNOMED or any other FHIR topic, you can just come along to that group and that we can help you out on that.
I think Christina answered my question with another question, where she And she says it's especially related to publication. She doesn't distribute anything in Excel anymore. And I can only congratulate. Maybe I should take a FIRE course. I also think maybe it depends on in what country and what setting you're working and what other tools people there are using.
Yes.
But your initial question was if this was related to the time frame, and well, honestly, maybe most projects didn't mention much about where they published. A few did, and no, I can't say from the included papers that this has become better or worse. But yes, I agree. It should become better, and that's maybe what we were saying also in the discussion that both FIRE and OpenEHR are publishing subsets.
Yep. And
oh, Asian friendly edition. Daniel is typing in the chat.
Yes, thank you, Daniel. Yes, SNOMED on Fire Asia friendly edition at 10 UTC every 4th week starting today. They're a group to learn FIRE and OpenEHR. I am not quite sure about the answer to that one. I'm sorry.
No, I don't think there is.
Okay.
I don't know of any group, and especially not any group catering for both of those. But that was a link to the SNOMED CT on FIRE group anyway.
Oh, great. Thank you.
So there's SNOMED support for that. And I think if you give it a minute, Michael will probably post something about where to learn more about OpenEHR.
Oh, thank you guys for helping. There is only so many screen space I have here. So thank you guys for doing that.
Having both the chat and the Q&A was a bit messy. Or messy, but it was a bit confusing. I didn't know yet.
You did great, and audience, thank you so much. You guys did great. There was a lot going on, but this was really excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Rossander, and thank you to everyone who was able to join us today. This was a really inspiring discussion, and if you have any further questions for Dr. Rossander, go ahead and email me and I'll get them over to her. And otherwise, I am really looking forward to seeing you all next month. And thank you again, Anna. This was awesome. And yeah, thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.